Somewhere in Afghanistan, a stadium packed with thousands of people sat in absolute silence. No cheering, no noise, no movement. In the center of that field stood men in black, and in front of them, two human beings whose only crime was stealing food. What happened next was filmed, documented, and then announced over loudspeakers across the entire city, so that everyone who wasn't there would still know exactly what they had missed. But here's what no one talks about. The executions weren't the most terrifying part. The most terrifying part was what the Taliban did before the killing even started. Because they didn't just want people dead. They wanted people watching. They wanted children in those stands. They wanted mothers and fathers to carry those images home and never sleep the same way again. This wasn't punishment. This was engineering, the deliberate, calculated construction of a nation paralyzed by fear. And what you're about to hear will show you exactly how they built it, brick by brick, body by body, and why, even today, it is still not over. If you're someone who believes history's darkest chapters should never be forgotten, you're exactly who this channel was built for. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. At Timelines of War, we go where most channels won't. Every story we tell is real. Every name we mention was a real person. And every event in this video actually happened. Now let's go back to where this all began. Before you can understand what the Taliban built, you have to understand what they walked into. By the early 1990s, Afghanistan had already been bleeding for over a decade. The Soviet Union had invaded, fought a brutal war, and then left. But when they pulled out, they didn't leave peace behind. They left behind warlords, armed factions fighting each other for cities, roads, and money, while ordinary Afghans were crushed in the middle. There was no law, no safety, no one to call when your neighbor was kidnapped or your brother was shot at a checkpoint. Children grew up not knowing if they would survive the walk to school. Women disappeared from markets. Men were executed for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Afghanistan wasn't just broken, it had been hollowed out completely. And then the Taliban arrived with a single promise: we will bring order. For people who had lived in chaos for years, that promise was enough. They started in Kandahar in 1994. Young men, most of them raised in Pakistani refugee camps on a diet of war stories and narrow religious schooling. They moved fast, disarmed rivals, executed those who resisted, and absorbed those who surrendered. Town after town fell, sometimes through fighting, sometimes just through reputation. Commanders fled overnight rather than face them. By September 26, 1996, the Taliban entered Kabul, and on the very first day they told the entire country exactly what kind of rulers they intended to be. Dr. Mohammad Najibullah had been Afghanistan's president. When his government fell in 1992, he took refuge inside a United Nations compound in Kabul. For 4 years he lived there, believing international protection meant something. He was wrong. The moment Taliban fighters entered the city, they went straight for him. They stormed the compound, they dragged him out. What followed was not a quick execution. It was deliberate, calculated brutality. He was beaten, castrated, then shot dead. His brother was killed alongside him. Then they hung both bodies from a traffic post in central Kabul. And to make sure everyone understood the message, they stuffed cigarettes and banknotes into Najibullah's mouth. A final act of humiliation, a statement of absolute contempt for everything he had represented. The bodies stayed hanging in public view for days. This was day one, not a mistake, not an excess of violence by rogue fighters. A deliberate opening statement from a movement that wanted every Afghan to understand one thing from the very beginning: no one is protected. No one is untouchable. And no one is coming to save you. What made Taliban rule different from ordinary tyranny was not just the violence. It was the system they constructed around every single aspect of daily life. Courts were established almost immediately, but these were nothing like any court the world would recognize. No lawyers, no written laws citizens could read or study, no appeals, no independent judges, just Taliban clerics who answered only to Taliban leadership, delivering verdicts in minutes and carrying them out the same day. Then came the rules. Music banned. Not just concerts, all music. Radios were smashed in the streets. Televisions were pulled from homes. Photographs were forbidden. Movies ceased to exist. Kite flying, one of the most beloved traditions in Afghan culture, something children had done for generations, outlawed. Wedding celebrations were silenced. Men were ordered to grow beards to a specific minimum length. Shaving was a punishable offense. Women were required to wear the full burqa at all times outside the home. Women were banned from working, banned from education, banned from appearing in public without a male relative escort. To enforce all of this, the Taliban deployed their religious police. Men with whips and wooden sticks who patrolled every street, every market, every neighborhood. They stopped people to measure beard lengths. They checked whether a woman's ankle was visible beneath her robe. They searched homes for hidden radios. Violations were punished on the spot. A woman whose burqa shifted in the wind could be beaten in front of her children. A man whose beard was deemed too short could be dragged to a detention cell. A shopkeeper who played music quietly in the back of his store could lose his livelihood, or worse. And underneath all of this ran a logic that was simple and ancient and brutally effective. When people are afraid enough, they police themselves. The Taliban didn't need to watch everyone. They just needed everyone to believe they were being watched. The Taliban understood something that every authoritarian system eventually learns. Fear works best when it has an audience. Private executions create rumors. Public executions create memory, and memory is the most powerful weapon of all. Ghazi Stadium in Kabul had been built for sport. The Taliban turned it into something else entirely. On Fridays, after prayers, people were ordered to attend. Not invited, ordered. Refusing to show up could itself draw suspicion. So families came. Fathers brought sons. Mothers brought daughters. Children who should have been playing sat in the stands and watched what their government called justice. British journalist Jason Burke witnessed one of these events in 1998 and documented what he saw. 2 men convicted of theft were led to the center of the field. Doctors stood nearby, not to treat anyone, but to supervise the procedure and ensure it was carried out correctly. 1 hand and 1 foot were amputated from each man while they were conscious. Blood soaked into the grass. Thousands of people sat without making a sound. No one cheered. No one protested. No one looked away, because looking away was dangerous. When the amputations were complete, the men were carried outside the stadium and shot dead. Then the crowd was told to go home. The following week, the stadium hosted a sports match, as if nothing had ever happened. The Taliban called this for an eye. They called it divine justice. What it actually was theater. Carefully staged, deliberately public, designed to burn a single image into the mind of every person in those stands. This is what we are capable of. And you are next if you step out of line. In 1999, what happened at Ghazi Stadium crossed a line that shocked even people who had already seen years of Taliban rule. A woman was brought before a crowd of thousands. She was accused of adultery. She was wearing a full burqa, completely covered, completely anonymous, completely alone. She was forced to kneel at the center of the field. A Taliban guard walked up behind her and shot her in the head. No name was announced. No evidence was presented. No defense was offered. No appeal had been made. The verdict had been delivered in a Taliban court, in minutes, based on an accusation. The execution was filmed on a handheld camera. The footage eventually made it outside Afghanistan and spread across international media, triggering outrage from governments, human rights organizations, and the United Nations. The Taliban's response was essentially silence, and beneath that silence, satisfaction, because the footage spreading globally didn't hurt them, it helped them. It told every Afghan watching that the entire outside world had seen what happened, and the Taliban were still standing, still in power, still untouchable. For Afghan women, this killing meant something specific and terrifying. It proved that accusation alone was enough. You didn't need to do anything wrong. You needed only one person, a neighbor, a jealous relative, someone with a personal grudge, to say the words. And within hours, a Taliban court could end your life. In February 1998, Taliban Supreme Leader Mullah Mohammed Omar issued a direct personal order. 3 men accused of homosexuality were to be buried alive. The method was specific. The men were placed in a pit. A brick wall was constructed beside them. The wall was then pushed over, designed to collapse on top of them and crush them to death under the rubble. Before it fell, Taliban officials told the 3 men survive for 30 minutes, and you will go free. Against every probability, all 3 men survived. They were pulled from the debris and rushed to a hospital. Their survival didn't bring mercy. It brought embarrassment. The punishment had failed mechanically, not morally. As far as the Taliban were concerned, Taliban judges publicly stated their position afterward with complete clarity. Men accused of homosexuality had exactly 2 options: death by stoning or death by crushing. No discussion of evidence. No consideration of age or circumstances. No gray area of any kind. The punishment existed for one purpose: to erase people, and to make everyone watching understand that certain lives had no protection whatsoever under Taliban rule. This was not chaos. This was not extremism running out of control. This was policy. When the United States invaded Afghanistan in October 2001, the Taliban collapsed faster than almost anyone expected. Their fighters abandoned government buildings overnight. The public execution stopped. Ghazi Stadium went back to being a sports venue. Many Afghans allowed themselves to breathe for the first time in years. But the Taliban didn't disappear. They retreated into the countryside, the mountains, and across the border. And from those spaces, they began rebuilding quietly. Through the 2000s and 2010s, Taliban fighters controlled vast stretches of rural Afghanistan. In provinces like Helmand, Kandahar, and Ghazni, the government in Kabul existed in name only. The Taliban were the real authority. They ran what researchers called shadow courts, operating in mosques, private homes, and village clearings. No records. No witnesses allowed to speak. People accused of working with the government, teaching school, or simply being reported by a neighbor were taken from their homes at night. Many were never seen again. In 2010, a case in Kunduz province broke into international headlines. A young man and woman had tried to run away together, both escaping forced marriages. They were caught, brought before a Taliban gathering. Local villagers were ordered to watch. The woman was stoned to death. The man survived, badly beaten. This was not a rogue act. It was Taliban policy applied openly, designed to be witnessed and remembered. In 2014, as international troops began withdrawing, Taliban fighters publicly hanged 5 men at an open-air market in Helmand. Farmers and traders were ordered to stop and watch. The bodies were left hanging overnight, on purpose. Taliban commanders wanted it documented. They wanted people to understand who actually governed this land. August 15, 2021, the Afghan government collapsed in days. Taliban fighters entered Kabul for the second time in 25 years. The president fled the country. Soldiers laid down their weapons. Government buildings emptied overnight. Taliban leaders appeared on television and spoke calmly. They promised amnesty for former soldiers, police officers, government workers. A new era, they said. Things would be different. Some people wanted to believe it. Within days, the searches began. Door to door, house to house. Taliban fighters moved through neighborhoods in Kabul looking for anyone connected to the former government, foreign forces, or civil society organizations. Former soldiers disappeared. Young men were taken for questioning. Some came back. Many did not. Bodies appeared on roadsides, in fields, in the dark. Families who lost someone didn't report it. Reporting meant drawing attention, and drawing attention meant becoming the next name on a list. The machine was being rebuilt quietly, efficiently. Exactly as it had been before. By late 2022, the Taliban had fully reconstructed their judicial system. The Supreme Court was back, staffed entirely by male clerics loyal to Taliban leadership. Defendants had no lawyers. Confessions made under pressure were accepted as proof. Trials lasted minutes. In November 2022, 19 people were publicly flogged in Takhar province. 39 lashes each. 9 of them were women. The charges included adultery and leaving home without permission. In December 2022, the Taliban carried out their first confirmed public execution since returning to power. A man shot before hundreds of forced witnesses in Farah province. Approved personally at the highest level of Taliban leadership. The United Nations condemned it. Nothing changed. By mid-2023, Taliban courts had sentenced 175 people to execution and 37 to death by stoning, numbers released by the Taliban themselves. Independent researchers believe the actual figures are higher. In a single 6-month period, UN monitors documented over 300 people publicly flogged, among them elderly men, pregnant women, and children. At least 274 men, 58 women, and 2 children confirmed flogged in public. Dozens more sentenced to amputation or death. The United Nations called these punishments stoning, amputation, burial alive, public execution, violations of international law, and demanded they stop. The Taliban continued. In 2015, in the remote province of Ghor, a 19-year-old woman named Rokhshana made a decision that should not have required courage anywhere in the world. She tried to choose who she spent her life with. Forced marriages were the norm in her community. Girls had no real power to refuse what male relatives arranged. Rokhshana refused anyway. She and a young man named Mohammed Gol tried to leave together. They were caught. There was no formal court, no process. Taliban fighters gathered on the spot, delivered a verdict in minutes, and carried it out immediately. Rokhshana was forced into a shallow pit as men surrounded her. She was stoned to death. The killing was filmed on a mobile phone. The video spread internationally. Human rights organizations confirmed it was real. She was 19 years old. She wanted to choose her own future. Mohammed Gol was flogged. He survived. In the villages around Ghor, people spoke in whispers afterward. Children woke screaming at night. Parents told daughters not to be seen. Elders who once settled disputes with wisdom fell silent, because they had watched something that had no answer, only grief. That is the full scope of what the Taliban built. not just in courtrooms or stadiums, inside the minds of an entire population. Afghanistan today moves quietly. People delete messages before stepping outside. Women minimize time in public and keep their eyes down. Families warn each other constantly. Stay invisible. Don't give anyone a reason to notice you. Girls' schools remain closed across most of the country. Right now, not in history, but today, a generation of young women is being denied education in real time. The United Nations continues issuing statements. The international community continues expressing concern. None of it has stopped a single flogging, a single execution, a single night raid. What the Taliban built, the first time and again the second time, was never really a government. It was a machine designed to produce one outcome: total, unquestioning submission. And the fuel that machine runs on is fear. It ran on fear in 1996. It ran on fear through 20 years of shadow courts and roadside bodies. And it runs on fear today. These stories need to be told. These names need to be remembered. Because the easiest thing in the world, for all of us sitting safely somewhere far away, is to forget. Don't forget. Share this video. Tell someone who doesn't know this history. Subscribe to Timelines of War, because we are not done telling these stories, not even close. Timelines of War, subscribe, notifications on, share this video.